tato jaya udire nashtaprayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavate uttam shloke bhaktir bhavatir naishtaki Om Agyantimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Mukham karoti vachanam pangam nangati girim yat kripatamaham vande Shri Guru Din Taranam Paramanandam Madhavam. So we are resuming our discussion from 4.7.54. These are the set of verses that are spoken by Lord Vishnu when he appears in the second attempt of the sacrifice of Prajapati Daksha. So this was preceded by prayers by different participants of the yajna: Daksha, Lord Shiva, Lord Brahma, and the Brahmanas, the Siddhas. So different personality prayers. And we see that the Lord is now responding more specifically to Daksha. And the general theme that is there in the response to Lord is that he's emphasizing on the non-difference between him and Lord Shiva, which is a way of him to chastise Daksha. That how could you even imagine worshipping me without my devotees? So he makes this point in different ways, that how Brahma and Shiva are guna avatars, how they're in charge for creation and destruction. So we'll resume from verse 54. 54 has a fairly lengthy discussion on it, mostly coming from Jiva Goswami. Because as in all these discussions, the context is important. So the acharyas are concerned that people may misinterpret these verses to establish that Lord Shiva is the same as Lord Vishnu. And they can quote from the Bhagavatam. Well, it's said in the Bhagavatam in 4.7, 52, 53, 54, Lord Vishnu is saying himself that Lord Shiva is not different from me. So Jiva Goswami goes one step beyond. And he says, not only over here, but there are other places also where this point is made. And then in his own imitable style, he takes all the points of this perspective and refutes them. Okay. So verse 54. Trayana mekabhavana yona pashati vaibhidam sarvbhutatmanam brahman sashantem adhigacchati. The Lord continued, one who does not consider Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, or the living entities in general to be separate from the Supreme, and who knows Brahman, actually realizes peace, and others do not. So the result of seeing the non-difference is stated in this verse. So the non-difference here is now extended to the Jivas. So previously Lord Vishnu was saying that I am the same as, excuse me, I am the same as Brahma and Shiva. Now he's saying I am the same as Brahma and Shiva and the Jivas. So which is why Jiva Goswami steps in here, because this is also fertile grounds for the impersonalists. That the Lord is saying that one who sees the Jivas as non-different from me, sa shantim adhigacchati. He is the one who achieves peace. From the Vaishnava Siddhanta, this can be understood as unity in diversity. Achintya bheda, bhed. That one who understands this tattva can attain peace. Because seeing a difference will cause the opposite of peace, which is turmoil. That is seen in the case of Prajapati Daksha. So in Paramatma Sandarbha, this appears in Anuched 17, Jiva Goswami, he takes 4 verses from the Bhagavatam, which glorify Lord Shiva as non-different or even superior to Lord Vishnu. So 2 of the verses he takes from this chapter, verse 50 and verse 54. And these 2 verses are showing that there is no difference between Lord Vishnu and Lord Shiva. So then he also quotes from the 12th canto, 10th chapter. So this is the Markandeya Rishi episode. So briefly just describing it to establish context, that Markandeya Rishi was once deep in meditation. And at that time, Lord Shiva and Parvati Devi were traveling in the airways. And Parvati Devi, noticing Markandeya, became very compassionate. And she turned to her husband and she said, look, he's performing, so sincerely he's performing austerities. You must go and give him some benediction. So Lord Shiva turns to Parvati Devi and she says that for sages like Markandeya Rishi, I have nothing to offer, because they are so elevated that they have no material desires. But Parvati Devi, being Parvati Devi, she insists. So Lord Shiva says, okay, if you insist, I will go, but to get his association. So we see the humility of Lord Shiva over here. Now, Lord Shiva comes and stands in front of Markandeya Rishi. And Markandeya Rishi, he is so deeply absorbed in his meditation that he does not notice Lord Shiva. And Lord Shiva is standing patiently and Markandeya Rishi is simply absorbed in his meditation. So Lord Shiva, by his mystic powers, he enters into the heart of Markandeya Rishi, and there, in the meditation of Markandeya Rishi, Lord Shiva appears. So when Markandeya Rishi gets the audience of Lord Shiva in his mind, he immediately opens his eyes, sees Lord Shiva standing in front of him and offers obeisances to him. Now we see the difference between Daksha and Lord Shiva. That when Daksha entered the assembly, Lord Shiva was absorbed in the meditation of Lord Vishnu. And Daksha took offense. When Lord Shiva came in front of Markandeya Rishi also, he neglected Lord Shiva. But there was no offense taken by Lord Shiva. And when Markandeya Rishi opens his eyes, then Lord Shiva, he recites this verse saying that this is 12th canto, 10th chapter, verse 22. These devotees do not differentiate between Lord Vishnu, Lord Brahma, and me. nor do they differentiate between themselves and other living entities. Therefore, because you are this kind of saintly devotee, we worship you. Right? So Jiva Goswami quotes this verse as an example of Lord Shiva saying that he is the same as Lord Vishnu. Right? Because in this chapter, Lord Vishnu is saying, I am the same as Lord Shiva. Now, in this 12th canto, Lord Shiva is saying, I am the same as Lord Vishnu. So, these verses apparently indicate that even the Bhagavatam is supporting that Lord Shiva and Lord Vishnu are at the same platform. So Jiva Goswami explains this by what is known as Satkaryavad Nyaya. So Satkaryavad Nyaya is the principle of real causation. It's appears in Sankhya, and essentially what it says is that the cause lives in the effect. Shatkar Vadya. Karya is the cause, that the cause lives in the effect. Now, how does it apply over here? So, the point that he makes is that because Lord Vishnu is the cause of Lord Shiva, he stays in, he continues to reside in Lord Shiva by the principle of Shatkarvadya. Now, making the statement that Lord Shiva is non-different from Lord Vishnu is accurate. Because the cause is living in the effect. Because Lord Vishnu is there in Lord Shiva. So saying that Lord Shiva is non-different from Lord Vishnu is an accurate statement. But there is a difference that the effect is dependent on, but the cause is not dependent on the effect. So while Lord Shiva is non-different from Lord Vishnu is different from Lord Shiva. Right? So this basically translates to non-commutative arithmetic. So generally when we say if A is equal to B, B is equal to A, but then in set theory we know that if B is a part of A, then we can say B is equal to A, but we cannot say A is equal to B. If there's a superset in which we say set of all human beings, and then we say set of Indians. So saying that Indians are humans is correct. Saying that humans are Indians is not correct, because there are humans who are Americans and Africans and different kind there. So that essentially is Shatkar Vadya. So based on that, Jiva Goswami says that whenever Lord Vishnu says that Lord Shiva is identical to me, he is correct. But no bona fide scripture will say that Lord Vishnu is identical to Lord Shiva. So that is the difference. So in the Bhagavad-Gita, chapter 7, verse 19, where Krishna says Vasudeva Sarvam Iti, so Mahatmasa Durlabha. Right. So the point that Krishna is making, that one who sees everybody as Vasudeva Sarvam Iti, one who sees everybody as Vasudev Samatma Sa Durlava. But then right after that, he says that what does such a person do? Mam prapadanti. Now, Krishna does not say that such a person will surrender to everyone, right? Because if the statement was that if everybody is identical to Krishna, then you could surrender to everybody, or you could surrender to Krishna. It should be the same. But Krishna does not say that. Krishna says that such a Mahatma will mam prapadyanti, that he will surrender to me only and not to everyone. So this is another instance of Shatkaryavad logic. In the Padma Puran, the second Namaprad is to consider the name of the Devas like Brahma and Shiva to be equal or independent of the name of Vishnu. And then there is the opposite verse in Padma Purana that says that it is an offense against the holy name to perceive the attributes of Shiva as different from that of Lord Vishnu. Similarly, in the Narad Puran, it is said that to disregard one's guru, to criticize a sadhu, and to uphold the difference between Hari and Shiva, and to criticize the Vedas, all on the strength of the holy name of Hari, is to strive simply for offenses. So, Jiva Goswami says that these verses may seem contradictory, but they are resolved by the principle of Shatkarvadya. That people who consider Lord Shiva to be different from Lord Vishnu are denying the fact that Lord Vishnu is the cause of Lord Shiva. That's the offense. That's why it is condemned. But people who consider Lord Vishnu to be the same as Lord Shiva, they don't understand the position of Lord Vishnu. That's the offense. Then he says that if Vishnu and Shiva are identical, then in the first canto, when the list of incarnations are given, Lord Shiva's name should have been mentioned there, but it is not there. Similarly, Atri and Ansuya, they gave birth to Dattatreya, Som and Durvasha. Right? Som is an Amsha of Brahma, Durvasha is an Amsha of Shiva, and Dattatreya is an Amsha of Vishnu. But only Dattatreya is mentioned as an incarnation, not Soma, not Durvasha. So these are some of the arguments given by Jiva Goswami. In the third canto, 14th chapter, verse 29, Kashyap Muni glorifies Lord Shiva as follows. He says that demigods like Brahma also follow the religious rites observed by him. He is the controller of the material energy, which causes the creation of the material world. He is great, and therefore his devilish characteristics are simply imitation. So this is Kashyap Muni talking about Lord Shiva. So in this verse, so this is the verse where Kashyap is talking to Diti about Lord Shiva. So it appears to glorify Lord Shiva as the cause of the universe and its maintainer. Right? He says that he is the controller of the material energy, which causes the creation of the material world. Jiva Goswami says that in this conversation, Kashyap is not trying to establish the position of Lord Shiva with respect to Vishnu. He is simply speaking about the power and potency of Lord Shiva in order to dissuade Diti from an union at an inappropriate time. So yes, Lord Shiva is considered to be the creator, maintainer, and destroyer because the material universe comes from him. But that does not change the fact that he is empowered by Lord Vishnu. So when the churning of the ocean in the Sagar Manthan pastime, when the poison came out and it was burning the eyes and the breath of the Devas, they go to Lord Shiva for help, right? So they say that, "O Lord Girish, since your effulgence, O Shiva, is transcendental to the material modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance, the various directors of the material world certainly cannot appreciate it or even know where it is. It is not understandable even to Lord Brahma, Lord Vishnu, or the King of Heaven, Mahindra." So here, the Devas are apparently saying that the glories of Lord Shiva are beyond the comprehension of Lord Vishnu. And Jiva Goswami here comments that this is the principle of Mahimna Studimanam Hi Deva Virena Vardate, that the gods excel in their powers when they are praised in simple words. So essentially the principle is encouraging by exaggeration. It's like when the team is going to play a sport and the coach comes in and says that you are the best in this world. You are the best team. The other team does not have a chance. Each one of you is superlative. And the team is going, "Rawr, yes, yes," right? Now, both the coach and the team knows that the statements are not true. That the team is not the best in the whole world. It may be a small team that is simply presenting their local school, but the coach will speak in these words, right? So this is Mahimnastuyamanam, that in order to encourage the person, the other person, he takes shelter of what is known as credible exaggeration. So the person wants to say you're a good team. There's credibility in there, but the exaggeration is that you're the best team in the world. That part is exaggeration. So when the Devas are glorifying Lord Shiva, there is credibility in their glorification. But then there is also the exaggeration. So these statements come in the category of Arthavad. Jiva Goswami says Arthavad, these statements that are contextually to be interpreted, but are not literally true. Like a husband telling his wife, "You're the most beautiful woman in this world." It's Arthavad. Because the husband has not looked at all the women in the world. And in all likelihood, his wife is not the most beautiful. But he says it, the wife accepts it, they're both happy. But one cannot come and criticize the husband, "You're lying to your wife." It is basically understood contextually. So Jiva Goswami therefore concludes that everywhere in the Vedas, wherever Tattva is present, the position of Lord Shiva is clearly articulated. And otherwise, it needs to be taken contextually. So Quresh, who is one of the foremost disciples of Ramanujacharya, he comments that whenever there are statements in the Vedas that glorify the Devas as supreme, they should be considered as exaggerations. Whenever there is a statement in the Vedas that glorify Vishnu as supreme, they are understatements. So this is the mode in which the devotees accept these statements. So Lord Brahma, in his prayers, he says that one cannot count the unlimited atoms in the universe. One can count the unlimited atoms in the universe, but not the qualities of the Lord. And Anantashesh, with his unlimited mouths for unlimited time, has been glorifying the Lord, but the glorification is still incomplete. So based on that, Quresh says that any glorification of Krishna is an understatement. And any glorification of the Devas, where they are glorified as supreme, is either untrue or an exaggeration. So reading all this, somebody might say that, but Jiva Goswami is a Vaishnava. So naturally he is biased. He will speak in favor of Krishna. So he's interpreting verses that glorify Lord Vishnu as factual, and he's interpreting verses that glorify Lord as exaggeration, contextual. So then Jiva Goswami says, fine, don't believe me. But then you believe Lord Shiva. So he quotes from 8th canto, chapter 7, verse 40, where he says that Lord Shiva is saying that when one performs benevolent activities for others, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, is very pleased. And when the Lord is pleased, I am also pleased along with all other living creatures. So Lord Shiva is speaking about how he follows the desires of Lord Vishnu. Similarly, when Durvasha Muni, this is in the Amrish Maharaj episode, when Durvasha Muni had gone to Lord Shiva for protection, then Lord Shiva, who's actually the father of Durvasha, in a way, Durvasha is a partial expansion, he says that, my dear son, I, Lord Brahma, and the other demigods who rotate within this universe under the misconception of our greatness cannot exhibit any powers to compete with the personality of Godhead. So Lord Shiva therefore says that I worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead who is greater than any one of us, under whose control are situated all the demigods, material elements and senses, and even Lord Brahma, and I myself like birds bound by the rope. Only by the Lord's grace can we create, maintain, and annihilate the material worlds. Therefore, I submit my respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Being. So, Jiva Goswami is saying that even if you accept me as biased, don't accept Lord Shiva as biased. So this is the same argument that he used to establish the position of the Bhagavatam, that if you consider the Vedas to be authoritative, then the Vedas say that the Puranas are the fifth Vedas. So then you have to accept the statement of the Vedas and accept the Puranas to be at the same level as the Vedas. So he is establishing the same logic here, that if you accept Lord Shiva to be the absolute authority, you have to accept the statement of Lord Shiva, where he is saying that he is not the absolute authority, but Lord Vishnu is the absolute authority. So the question, of course, is that why are these seemingly contradictory statements made? And then the answer has been given to us by Srila Prabhupada many times, that this is to allow the persons to stabilize their conception according to their modes. So in Bhagavad-Gita 7:21, Krishna says that when one engages in the worship of a demigod, I make their faith steady. Right? And in the Nectar of Devotion, chapter 7, it is said that Krishna or Hari is the master of all demigods, and therefore he is always worshipable. But that does not mean that one should not offer respect to the demigods. So how does Krishna make the faith of a person who is worshipping demigods steady? By statements like these, where he is glorifying the Devas. When somebody reads that Lord Vishnu is glorifying Lord Shiva, then his faith in Lord Shiva will become steady. And the reason Krishna wants their faith in Lord Shiva to become steady, because that is their adhikar at the time. That is what their swabhav is going to allow them to do. Srila Prabhupada in the purport says that two words are very significant in this word. Trayanam indicates three, namely Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and Lord Vishnu. And Bhidam means different. They are three and therefore they are separate, but at the same time they are one. So this is the principle of unity and diversity, the simultaneous oneness and difference. Achinta bheda, bheda tattva. So that is why the study of the Vedas needs to be done under the guidance of a guru. So even Vyas and Narad had to be explained the Srimad Bhagavatam from their respective gurus, right? Narad explained it to Vyas and Brahma explained it to Narad. So what to speak of ordinary beings? So in the Nectar of Devotion, Rupa Goswami commenting on one of the Vyabhachari Bhav, which is thoughtfulness, says that in Vishaka Mahatmya section of Padma Puran, a devotee states that though in some of the 18 Purans, the process of glorifying Lord Vishnu is not mentioned, and the glorifying of some demigod is offered, such glorification of Vishnu must be continued for millions of years. For when one studies the Puranas very scrutinizingly, he can see that Lord Vishnu is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is an instance of ecstatic love developed out of thoughtfulness. Okay, so this was the concluding verse of instruction given by Lord Vishnu, which, as I mentioned, is a subtle way of chastising Daksha. So let's see what happens next. Verse 55. Maitreya vacha evam bhagavata prajapati patir harim achitva karutana achitva kratuna sevan devanubhyato yajat. The sage Maitreya said, thus Daksha, the head of all Prajapatis, having been nicely instructed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, worshipped Lord Vishnu. After worshipping him by performing the prescribed sacrificial ceremonies, Lord Daksha separately worshipped Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva. So in this 7 verses, 55 to 61, we will see that Daksha completes the sacrifice. In 55, 56, and 57, we'll see that he worships Lord Shiva and the other devas. Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport that Daksha worshipped Brahma and Shiva with the remnants of the offerings of Lord Vishnu. So he says that Prabhupada says that Lord Vishnu should be offered everything, and his prasad should be distributed to all the demigods. This practice is still followed in the temple of Jagannath at Puri. There are many temples of demigods around the main temple of Jagannath, and the prasad which is offered first to Jagannath is distributed to all the demigods. The deity of Bhaglin is worshipped with the prasad of Vishnu. And also in the famous Lord Shiva temple of Bhubaneswara, the prasad of Lord Vishnu or Lord Jagannath is offered to the deity of Lord Shiva. This is Vaishnava principle. Okay, let's go to the next verse, 56. Rudram cha svena bhagena haya upadhavat samahitah karmano davasanena samapan itaranapi udavasya sahat vigbi sasnavava vratam tatah. With all respect, Daksha worshipped Lord Shiva with a share of the remnants of the yajna. After finishing the ritualistic sacrificial activities, he satisfied all the other demigods, and the other people assembled there. Then, after finishing all these duties with the priest, he took a bath and was fully satisfied. So Prabhupada says that Lord Rudra Shiva was properly worshipped with a share of the remnants of the yajna. Yajna is Vishnu, and whenever prasad is offered to Vishnu, is offered to everyone, even to Lord Shiva. Sridhar Swami also comments in this connection, Svena Bhagena. The remnants of the yajna are offered to everyone. And after concluding the yajna, Daksha, he takes the ceremonial Avapratam, which is the bath that is taken at the end of the performance of yajna. Tasma apyanubhavena svenevapkataradhase dharma eva matim dattva tridashaste divam yayu. Thus worshipping Supreme Lord Vishnu by the ritualistic performance of sacrifice, Daksha was completely situated on the religious path. Moreover, all the demigods who had assembled at the sacrifice blessed him, that he might increase his piety. And then they left. So the Devas gave the blessings to Daksha, who had attained the perfection in the months of yajna. So this shows the humility of Daksha, that as a Prajapati and the son of Brahma, he occupied a much superior position. So Prabhupada said that Daksha was considerably advanced in religious principles. He awaited the blessings of the demigods. Thus, the great sacrifice conducted by Daksha ended in harmony and peace. Verse 58. Evam dakshani hitva sati purva kalevaram jajnehim vatah kshetre menayamiti shushruma. Maitreya said, I have heard that after giving up the body she had received from Daksha, Dakshyani, his daughter, took her birth in the kingdom of the Himalayas. She was born as the daughter of Mena. I heard this from authoritative sources. So Menaka is also known as Menaka and is the wife of the king of the personification of the Himalayas. So in the Harivamsh Puran, it is mentioned that the Pitras who do not have a body, who have a subtle body, and who are the sons of Prajapati Viraj and are called Vairaj, they had a Manasi daughter, a mental daughter by the name of Mena. So this is the same personality, Mena. She married Himavan, the personification of Himachal mountain, and then she had three daughters, Aparna, Ekaparna and Ekapatal. And then it is mentioned that how the three daughters, they performed very severe austerities. But Aparna was the foremost in austerities. So much so that her mother, because of concern, she comes and she says, you do not do such austerities. So she says, oh my child, please stop. So U is for child and Ma is for stop. So that is how Aparna got the name as Uma. Later on, she marries Lord Shiva. So she is essentially the personality of Sati taking birth again. Okay, verse 59. Tammeva dayitam bhuya avnakate patim ambika ananya bhaveka gatim shakti supteva purusham. Ambika, goddess Durga, who was known as Dakshyani, Sati, again accepted Lord Shiva as her husband. Just as different energies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead act during the course of new creation. So Prabhupada says that according to the verse of the Vedic mantras, Parasya Shaktir Vividva Shruyate. So this verse appears in the Shvetashvar Upanishad, chapter 6, verse 8. So Prabhupada quotes this and says that the Supreme Personality of Godhead has different varieties of energy. Shakti is feminine and the Lord is Purusha or masculine. It is the duty of the female to serve under the Supreme Purusha. Later he says Durga is a representation in the material world of both the marginal and the external energy. And Lord Shiva is a representation of the Supreme Person. The connection of Lord Shiva and Ambika or Durga is eternal. Sati could not accept any husband but Lord Shiva. How Lord Shiva remarried Durga as Himavati, the daughter of Himalayas, and how Kartik was born is a great story in itself. Next verse. Etad bhagvata sambho karma dakshadvara druhu Shutam bhagavachatak shishyat udvan me brahaspate. Maitreya said, my dear Vidur, I heard the story of the Daksha Yagya, which was devastated by Lord Shiva from Udhav, a great devotee and a disciple of Brahaspati. So, Maitreya is establishing the authenticity of that which he has spoken. Next verse. Idam pavitram paramisha cheshtitam yasyam ayusham agahumarshanam yo nityada karnyanaro nukrityayed tunotyagham kaurava bhakti bhavataha. The great sage Maitreya concluded, if one hears and again narrates with faith and devotion the story of Daksha Yagya as it was conducted by the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu, then certainly one is cleared of all contamination of material existence, O son of Kuru. So, Daksha is ending with the Falastuti. Maitreya is ending with the Falastuti of the Daksha Yagya. So he says that one who hears this and speaks it, all sins are destroyed. Why are sins destroyed? Because if one hears it attentively, then one understands all the lessons that are being imparted through it. One becomes careful of not committing Vaishnava Aparadha. One understands the position of Lord Vishnu and worships him. One understands the position of Lord Shiva and worships him to get devotion of Lord Vishnu. So, to glorify, so the first stuti that Maitreya says that just by hearing and speaking, that is itself sufficient. So this is like Brahma saying that in 10:14.8 that Tatenukampam Sumakshamano, that if one just develops an attitude of patiently waiting for the mercy of God, one gets liberation. So if one just understands the points that are made over here, that is sufficient to clear all the contamination of material existence. Daksha will appear again in the Bhagavatam. He will appear actually in the 6th canto and in chapters 4, 5, and 6. So this is essentially Daksha 2. That so what happens to Daksha after the yajna is not explained here, but it is explained by Srila Prabhupada at different points. So in the 30th chapter of the 4th canto, Prabhupada says that the controversy of the Dakshagya took place in the Swayambhavu Manu Manvantra. As a result, Daksha was punished by Lord Shiva. But of his praise to Shiva, he became eligible to regain his former opulence. According to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Daksha underwent severe penances up to the 5th Manvantra. Thus, at the beginning of the 6th Manvantra, known as Chakshusha Manvantra, Daksha regained his former opulences by the blessings of Lord Shiva. So Prabhupada is explaining what happened to Daksha after this. So after the yajna was finished, Daksha, he, for a very, very long time, from the 1st Manvantra all the way till the end of the 5th Manvantra. Right? So the mantra is in one Chaturgas. So we can imagine for so many millions of years, Daksha performed austerities. And then at the end of the 5th Manvantra, Daksha gives up his body. And in the 6th, at the beginning of the 6th Manvantra, which is the Chakshusha Manvantra, Daksha is born as the son of the Prachetas. Now, the interesting thing is that the effects of Vaishnava offense are so insidious that he still has to suffer the consequences of it. Even though for 5 Manvantras he has been performing austerities, even though he begged forgiveness of Lord Shiva, but he is still contaminated by it. Prabhupada mentions that King Daksha was the son of Lord Brahma. Therefore, in the previous birth, he was a Brahman. But because of his behaving like a non-Brahman by insulting or disrespecting Lord Mahadev, he had to take birth within the semen of a Kshatriya. That is to say, he became the son of the Prachetas. Not only that, but because of disrespecting Shiva, he had to undergo the tribulation of taking birth from the womb of a woman. So Prabhupada is saying that this is the consequence that he still had to suffer. Previously, Daksha had this very exalted position that he was born from the mind of Brahma. He was a Brahman. And he was, so to speak, unborn because he was born from the mind of Brahma, didn't have a mother. But because of that offense, he now he takes birth from Marisha. He takes birth from Marisha, who is the daughter of moon god. And in a Kshatriya, in a Kshatriya dynasty. So he fell from his exalted position. So therefore it is understood that Daksha, with the head of a goat, performed austerities till the end of the fifth mantra. At that time, sufficiently purified of the offenses, he gave up his body and was born again at the beginning of the sixth mantra as the son of Prachetas and Marisha, and once again became a Prajapati by the name of Daksha in a debilitated position. And because he was still contaminated by the offense, he continued to have this offensive mentality. Because in the next verse, we see that Daksha will curse another great devotee of the Lord, Narad Muni. Right? He curses, Narad Muni also curses moon god, but he curses Narad Muni. So Srila Prabhupada brings this to our attention to say that even exalted people who are like foremost of the Prajapatis have to suffer in this way. So very important for us to be careful. So this is the end of the 7th chapter. And I'll pause over here and see if there's any discussion.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. This is Nanda Gopal Das. Please accept my humble obeisances. Prabhu, I just have a question regarding the Lord Shiva being the supreme, how it's described in the Bhagavatam itself, and one may take that as the verdict, and especially the Shaivites, and they may say Lord Shiva is the supreme. How can you say Vishnu is the supreme? So you explained that nicely. And the question is that when statements like this appear in Bhagavatam itself, and also the other Puranas, the lower Puranas, also claim Lord Shiva being the supreme, and one may take Shiva to be the supreme, not Vishnu, then they are committing offenses against Vishnu, against the supreme personality of Godhead. So what hope they have? Do they have any hope, or that is one question. And second question, if such person argue with us, what should be our disposition towards them?
Thank you, Prabhu. Very nice questions. So for people who are influenced by such statements and take to the worship of Lord Shiva as supreme, the hope there is that they get mercy of Lord Shiva. That's why these statements are there. Because when people have a certain propensity because of which they cannot take to the worship of Lord Vishnu, Krishna himself makes arrangements that if you cannot worship me, worship Brahma, worship Shiva, worship Indra, worship Agni, worship the ghosts, worship the spirits. Now, all these arrangements are made by Krishna himself. So one way or the other, engage in following the statements of the scriptures. That's where their hope comes. That when they follow the scriptures, then the scriptures will guide them. When they follow great personalities like Lord Shiva will guide them. Their progress will be slow. Krishna makes this point always, that yes, because they are not properly situated, their progress will be slow. But compared to those who are not taking shelter, they are properly situated. So that is why these statements are made in the Bhagavatam. These statements are made in the lower Puranas. So that was your first question. I'm sorry, what was your second question, Prabhu?
How do we respond to those people who argue on the position of Lord Shiva? Because there are many people who argue. So what should be our disposition, and how do we treat them?
Okay, thank you. So it depends on what is the potential outcome of the discussion. Right? If somebody comes and says that, Lord Shiva is great, and you see that the person is basically arguing, Right? There's no point in arguing with the person. We of course don't agree with the person, but there's no point in arguing with the person, because what will happen as a result of that argument is the person will commit offenses against Lord Vishnu and against you. And if he has any hopes of making advancements, they're lost there. I remember at work at one point I was trying to preach to a Muslim person. He was a colleague of mine, very, very good friend. So I was very comfortable with him. And when I taken to Krishna consciousness, I was sharing it with him. And he was a pretty fixed up practitioner. So as we talked more and more, he became more and more, he was becoming more and more offensive without realizing it, but he was like, he started condemning deity worship. He started saying that Krishna is one of the empowered entities of Allah, different kind of things, that based on whatever they were whatever their understanding was. And then I spoke to Guru Maharaj about it, and then he said that it's better to leave him alone, because he's a good friend of yours. If he's appreciating you, he's making advancement. You engage him in debates and he becomes angry at you, and he starts speaking things that are offensive, then any hopes that he had, they're gone now, right? So if the person is in that mentality, then best is not to engage. But then if the person is seriously inquiring, then yes, it's important that we should have the discussion with them. There's so many scriptural references that are given by acharyas like Srila Prabhupada and Jiva Goswami, and it behooves us to share it with them. It also increases our faith, Prabhu. When we share it increases our faith also. You notice that. Okay, and thank you. I noticed there was a question in the chat. Unfortunately, I cannot read the chat. So somebody can, Prem Kishore Prabhu, can you read the question?
Yeah, Prabhu, I can read it. So this is from Premanjari Mataji. Daksha is offensive even though he has done a lot of austerity. Usually a person does austerity, they are offenseless. But here it is different. Is it right understanding that great austerity doesn't make one to be offensive or not to be offensive? What is the root cause? Is it a pride?
In this particular case, it is understood that the offenses of Daksha are emanating from his pride. The fact that in his second reincarnation, when he recites the famous Hamsa Bhuyam prayers and Lord Vishnu appears, then what does he ask Lord Vishnu? Right? He asks that, may I populate the universe. So by the performance of austerities, he achieved a very materially exalted position, but he did not achieve the favor of Krishna. Acharyas say that when Lord Vishnu had appeared in front of Daksha after the Hamsa prayers, if he was really affectionate towards Daksha, then he would have given Daksha what he asked and more. He would have given him that, yes, you will produce qualified progeny, and purified of your desires, you will come back to me. Lord Vishnu does not do that. He said, yes, he will have qualified progeny. So Lord Vishnu being Antaryami, knowing the inner desires of Daksha, knew that Daksha is not surrendering to him. He is simply using him to further his own possessions. So that's his pride. That's his pride, and that's why he continued to, even though his position was extremely exalted, but he continued to stay in the material realm.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Couple of questions, Prabhuji. Like one time when I was hearing, I heard that after the Daksha Yajna, when he got the goat head, so although he is purified by seeking forgiveness, but still he, out of embarrassment, he died very soon. Embarrassment of having a goat head and all that. So, and here we are hearing in Bhagavatam that he is, for 4 kalpas, 4 manvantaras he did the yajna. So is it some kind of kalpa veda or some other Puranic reference, Prabhuji?
So it depends on where you heard. If you heard it from your neighbor,
No, Prabhuji. I would not even consider if any non-devotee says. I don't remember from whom I heard.
So it depends on whom you heard it from, because Prabhupada is very clear, right? In the 6th canto, he clearly, in the 4th canto, chapter 30,
Sure.
he clearly says that this is what happened to Daksha.
Yes.
I mean, however, if there is another authoritative source that says that Daksha died, then it would be Kalpabheda, because pastimes change in different kalpas. But if it is just somebody saying it, I would not put too much.
Sure, Prabhuji. I would also ignore that other perspective, Prabhuji. And one more question, Prabhuji. Like, is Daksha in the next birth, he even curses Narada Muni. So he further degraded, Prabhuji, or is he got some mercy of Narada Muni or some devotees that? What is the end fate of Daksha, Prabhuji? He's repeatedly go on offense after offense like that.
It's a good question. I was thinking about it. It doesn't say clearly what happened to Daksha after this life, whether he went back to Godhead or he went back somewhere, or what happened, does not say clearly. I mean, obviously he did commit offense against Narada Muni, but at least the Bhagavatam does not say that. Maybe some other Puran might speak about it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so there are no more questions. We'll move on to the 8th chapter. And I'll just summarize the 7th chapter quickly. That the chapter began with Lord Shiva reviving Daksha's life. And Daksha now, he offers prayers of forgiveness to Lord Shiva. And with the blessings of Lord Shiva, Daksha resumes the yajna. So when he offers oblations, then Lord Vishnu arrives. And the bulk of the chapter is the different prayers offered by the demigods to Lord Vishnu. So in the prayers, we see this analysis done by Vishwanath Chakravarti Pad, that how the prayers are both praise to Lord Vishnu and indirect criticism to others. And then Chakravarti Pad says that essentially they are glorification of Bhakti and criticism of processes that are other than Bhakti. So after the prayers, we see the instructions by Lord Vishnu, in which he talks about how Lord Shiva is non-different from him, Lord Brahma is non-different from him, Jivas are non-different from him. We had a discussion on how Jiva Goswami explains this. And the chapter ends with a description of the sacrifice completed by Daksha. Okay, So we'll move on to the 8th chapter now. So from the 8th chapter onwards is, the title of the 8th chapter is Dhruv Maharaj leaves home for the forest. So from the 8th chapter onwards is essentially Dhruv Leela. And this is one of the most popular topics in the Bhagavatam that is spoken and Bhagavad Saptas. It has everything. It has everything in it. It has it's like a hit movie, right? It has excitement. It has anger. It has envy. It has valor. It has victory. It has suspense. Now we all know Dhruv Katha, so most of the suspense is gone. But all those components are there, and even I'm speaking about people who are bona fide Bhagavatam reciters. They relish a lot in talking about Dhruv Charita. I know Radha Govind Maharaj, he speaks for 7 days. Each day he speaks for about, I think, close to 2.5 hours. So he has almost 14-15 hours of lectures on these chapters of Dhruv Charitra. So quick recap that in 4.1, the first chapter in the 4th canto, Maitreya begins to describe the lineage of Swambhavu Manu. And so he talks about his 3 daughters, Akuti, Devahuti, and Prasuti. So in mentioning the progenies of Prasuti, Maitreya mentions that the daughter of Prasuti, Sati, did not have any children. So Vidur asks, why not? And then that basically is the segue into the Yajna of Daksha, which essentially covers 6 chapters from 4.2 to 4.7. So when Vidur first met Maitreya, he had asked to speak about Sarga and Visarga. And as the concluding part of Visarga, Maitreya had described the appearance of Swambhavu Manu. And then when he had finished the description of Swambhavu Manu, that was the finish of Visarga. But then he talks about the Nitya, or the continuous creation. And as that he describes the dynasties. So from this chapter, from 4.8 all the way till chapter 31, the descendants of Bhutan will be discussed. So as I mentioned, from the first chapter to the 7th chapter, the descendants of the 3 daughters of Manu is mentioned: Akuti, Devahuti, and Prasuti. Right? Actually, Devahuti is spoken about in the previous canto, 3rd canto from 20 to 24. But Prasuti is described. Now, Swambhavu Manu also had 2 sons. Right? He had older son by the name of Priyavarta and a younger son by the name of Bhutanpad. So in describing the dynasty of Manu, now Maitreya again reverts to speaking about the sons. So one may question that why did Maitreya not speak about the sons? The general understanding is that the sons are the Uttara Adhikaris, right? They hold the dynasties. So why didn't Maitreya speak about the sons first? And the answer is that Maitreya is also a devotee. He's also a person. He's not following a mathematical formula. So his attention goes to Devahuti first, because of the appearance of Lord Kapila. He's anxious to do Krishna Katha. So his attention automatically goes to Devahuti. And then when he's speaking about Devahuti, then he's speaking about the daughters. So he speaks about her sisters. He speaks about Prasuti. When he's speaking about Prasuti, he's speaking about Sati. When he's speaking about Sati, then he's speaking about the yajna of Prajapati Daksha. Now, even amongst the sons, Priyavrata is older than Uttanpad. But Maitreya first speaks about Uttanpad, the younger son. Acharya says for two reasons. One is that Maitreya is anxious to speak about Dhruva. Again, same mode of devotion, that he wants to speak about devotees. So, knowing that Dhruva appears in the dynasty of Uttanpad, knowing that in the dynasty of Dhruva, great personalities will appear, including the personality of Godhead himself will appear. So that's why his mind first goes to Uttanpad. Second reason is that when even though Priyavrata was the elder son, but when Swayambhu Manu asked him to take over ruling, he refused, because he was from the beginning very renounced. So which is why Uttanpad got the kingdom. Priyavrata actually went to perform austerities. And later on, Brahma convinced Priyavrata to come and take the rule again. So even though he was older, Uttanpad ruled first and then Priyavrata ruled again. Now, another interesting thing we'll see is that before speaking about the dynasty of Uttanpad, Maitreya will speak about the lineage of Adharma. And he speaks about the lineage of Adharma to get us ready to hear about the pastimes of Dhruva. So this chapter is a very long chapter. It has 82 verses in it. And again, most of the verses have long purports. So long chapter, long purports, lot of instructions are there. Very, very relishable, very easy to get absorbed and forget oneself in the nectar of this chapter. Okay, so without further ado, let's start with 4.8.1. Maitreya vacha sankadaya naradascha vibhurhamso runiryatihi naite grahana brahmasutta hayavasanurdhvaretasaha. The great sage Maitreya said, the four Mars sages led by Sanak, as well as Narad, Ribhu, Hamsha, Aruni, and Yati, all sons of Brahma, did not live at home, but became Urdhvareta, or Naishtik Brahmacharis, unadulterated celibates. So Maitreya is clarifying that he is not speaking about many of the sons of Brahma because they did not produce any lineage. So the lineage from Manu's daughter was described, and the lineage from Brahma's sons like Marichi was also described in first chapter of this canto. And though the sons of Manu should be now described, Maitreya, he's talking about the remaining sons of Brahma briefly. So first he's saying that there are many sons of Brahma that did not marry, did not have any children, no descendants. So here he mentions the 9 celibate sons. And they're mentioned, they appear in different parts, different personalities appear in different parts of the Bhagavatam. Ribhu appears actually in the 2nd canto, where he's mentioned that he's a perfected soul who walks around for the benefit of others by preaching to them. So collectively, Prabhupada, in the purport, he says they're known as Urdhva Retasaha, those who lift up. Semen is so important that if by yogi process one can lift the semen up to the brain, he can perform wonderful work. One's memory is enabled to act very swiftly, and the duration of life is increased. Yogis can thus perform all kinds of austerities with steadiness and be elevated to the highest perfectional stage, even to the spiritual world. Vivid examples of brahmacharis who accepted the principles of life are the 4 sages, Sanak, Sanatan, Sanandan, and Sanat Kumar, as well as Narad and others. So it's interesting to note that so Urdhva, which is upward flowing semen, this is an example of understanding the metaphorical way in which the scriptures speak. Because one who's looking at it from a more scientific perspective will basically deny this, saying that it's not anatomically possible for the semen to flow into the brain. However, Danveer Goswami, in his book Brain Gain, he makes this point, and he quotes many scientific references, that the same nutrients that are used in the production of the semen are also used in the production of the cells of the brain. He gives the example of selenium, that they're the same. They're the same. So which means that if the nutrients are being exhausted in the production of the semen, then the nourishment of the brain cells will be depleted, and vice versa. If the semen is being preserved, then those nutrients will be used to nourish the brain cells. So scientifically, it is being recognized that excessive sex can result in what is known as global transient amnesia, and it can affect what is known as the prefrontal cortex. Then when the brain is stimulated by sex or by release, then oxytocin and serotonins are produced, which are identical to the hormones that are released by a person when they abuse drugs. So much like drugs, sex also, it produces an addictive feeling and produce transient enjoyment followed by what is known as postcoital dysphoria. So the point that is being made over here is that many times we reject the words in the scriptures, considering them to be improbable. How can there be oceans of milk? How can there be ocean of sugarcane? How can the sun god be riding on a chariot when we know that sun is this? How can there be elephants on which the universe is existing? How can there be a tortoise on whose back the axis is running? How can there be a snake on whose hood the planets are existing? But before we reject it, we should accept the fact that the scriptures, they speak in metaphors, and for valid reasons, that they are not meant to be scientific books. So they're not going to explain in like in this case the chemical composition or the electromagnetic composition of the universe, but they want to make a point that is easily picturized and accepted there. So I just thought that this was something that reinforces our faith in the scriptures. That when Prabhupada said that Urdhva Retva means upwardly flowing semen, then we can understand that what it means actually is that it results in the increased nourishment, a fact that has been scientifically proven there. Okay, moving on to the next verse 2. Mrisha dharmasya bharyasyan dambham mayam cha shatruhan asuta mithunam tattu nirtir jagre prajaha. Another son of Lord Brahma was irreligion, whose wife's name was falsity. From their combination were born two demons named Damba or bluffing and Maya or cheating. These two demons were taken by a demon named Nirti, who had no children. So, after setting aside the 9 sons of Brahma who were celibate and did not have any children, Maitreya begins to speak about another son of Brahma, whose name was Adharmasya. So the family of Brahma's son Adharma will be described. Now we know when we studied in the 3rd canto that when Brahma was creating the material world, he was creating both good and bad qualities. And the first thing that he creates in the material world are the 5 kinds of Avidyas. So the predominating deities take their respective position based on their past activities and propensities. So such personalities like Adharma, who has the exalted position of being the son of Dharma, the son of Brahma. So one may wonder that he's the son of Brahma and he's taking such a position. And that's because that's his propensity. Just like Narad has a propensity of bhakti, and Marich has a propensity of karmakand. So they're both sons of Brahma, and they take the respective positions. The 4 Kumars have propensity of Gyan. They take those positions. Similarly, there are personalities who have irreligious propensities. So they take this position. So in 3.12.2, it is said that Brahma first created the nascent engagements like self-deception, the sense of death, anger after frustration, the sense of false ownership, and the illusory body conception of the forgetfulness of real identity. Again, in the 20th chapter of the 3rd canto, in describing Visarga, Lord Kapila had talked about the various types of creation by Brahma. And this included the various kinds of ignorances. This is in the 18th verse. The fact that he created demons. This is verse 23. And in verse 40, he said that he creates ghosts, fiends, and hobgoblins. So this is how we understand that Damba, who was the son of Adharma. So Damba means cheating. And Maya means activities that are suitable for cheating. So though they were brother and sister, they married because they were amshas of Adharma, because they were impious. And they were adopted by Nirti, who is in charge of the, Krishna Chakravarti says he is in charge of the southwest direction, which is considered inauspicious. So in the allegorical story of Puranjan, this appears in the 4th canto, chapter 25, Nirti is mentioned as the western gate. And this is a reference to the rectum. The rectum is supposed to be situated on the western gate side of the eyes, nose, and ears. This gate is specially meant for death. When an ordinary living entity abandons the present body, he passes through the rectum. Nirti also means cruelty. So here Maitreya is addressing Vidur as Shatruhan, so killer of the enemies, to indicate that people like Vidur who are pious by nature are also killing adharma. So Shatru is adharma as an enemy of dharma, and Han means they're killing the enemy of dharma. A double negation basically is saying that they are establishing the principles of dharma. So Prabhupada says that it is understood herein that adharma, irreligion, was the son of Brahma, and he married his sister Mrisha. This is the beginning of sex life between brother and sister. This unnatural combination of sex life can be possible in human society only when there is adharma or irreligion. It is understood that in the beginning of creation, Brahma created not only saintly sons like Sanak, Sanatan, and Narad, but also demoniac offsprings like Nirti, Adharma, Dambha, and falsity. Everyone was created by Brahma in the beginning. So one may wonder that why is Maitreya beginning this wonderful narration of Daksha with such kind of talk? So even though if it exists, why is he speaking about it? And the acharyas say that when the devotees hear about them, they become cautious about them. So when one hears that these things are bad, then they stay away from them. So the first step in defeating an enemy is recognizing the enemy. So this narration is essentially helping to do that. It's not a glorification of adharma, or it's not a glorification of incest, but it is a cautionary tale, to a cautionary note to the devotees. Since I'm almost out of time, I'm going to pause over here and we'll see if there's any discussion.
Prabhu, it is not allegory, right? The adharma or the bluff and maya. So that's actually the actual sons and the daughters of the Brahma. Am I right? Or
it's not allegorical. So because they had this name, that's how we recognize these things. So it's the other way around, right? Because they had names like this, created those tendencies, they created those deviations, and that's how we recognize it.
okay, Prabhu, that makes sense.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Like when we say like Lord Shiva, he appeared from the forehead of Brahma, and then Varaha from the nostril of Brahma. Brahma is not their father as such, and even those daughters and son that come from Brahma, they can just be like that also. No, they are not really son and daughter. Even they're getting married between themselves, it's not really between brother and sister. logically we can take it like that?
In so this is actually in this cases, yes, they're actually considered to be. So the example is given that Shatrupa and Sambhavu were also born of Brahma, and they married each other. But the explanation is that they come in the category of Jivas who simply enter the universe through Brahma. Whereas personalities like Adharma and Mrisha, they're the seminal children of Brahma. So they're related to one another. And what we'll see later on is that their children will also marry each other. So even if you assume that Adharma and Mrisha are appearing to Brahma, but then you see their children are going to marry one another, and their children will marry one another. So it's in a different category. It's not in the same category as Prithu Maharaj marrying Archi, or Yagya marrying Dakshina, or Swambhu marrying Shatrupa. They're in a different category.
Yes. Thank you, bro.
Also, Prabhu, there is just one clarification. The reason why Brahma created both good and the bad, the evil as well as the good, is to fulfill the desire of the living entities, right? Because people may have a question about that. How come God can create both evil and good? And so, is my understanding correct?
Yes. It goes back to the same root, right? Why does Krishna create the material world? In response to the desire of the Jivas. Whether good or bad, the whole material world is, from the perspective of the spiritual world, is a bad place. But Krishna creates the material world, right? Because the Jivas have desires. Within the material world, there are different grades of Jivas. So allowing for them to interact in a way that is according to their propensity, Brahma is simply following the footsteps of Krishna and creating good and bad.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you. Very good questions. Also, your questions are becoming more and more difficult. I'll have to start taking notes. So if there are no more items for discussion, we'll stop and continue on Wednesday. Vanchakalpatarubhayasya kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nithai Gaur Premanande. Hari Hari. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.